Welcome to datascience.show, the podcast where data science meets executive leadership. We talk with top AI and analytics thought leaders about turning data into real business impact. If you're a C-level leader or data expert shaping the future, you're in the right place.
Welcome to datascience.show. I'm Mirko. Today, a practical executive playbook for synthetic data. Quick premise. You've got a stalled AI project because data's missing, private, or too rare to train models. That delay costs revenue, slows compliance, and drains stakeholder patience. In the next 20 minutes, I'll give you decision rules you can use in 30 to 90 days, a short anonymized win, governance must-haves, procurement language, and a prioritized checklist you can take straight to legal and procurement.
Why this matters now. Privacy rules are tightening, data sharing is slow, and business cycles expect faster model outcomes. Synthetic data is not a silver bullet, but when used with discipline, it moves projects from exploration to execution. Strategy before technology. This episode is about decisions leaders must make, not deep technical how-to.
Microcase, anonymized. A regional bank with a fraud detection model hit a wall. They had sensitive transaction records, and labeled fraud examples were historically rare. The pilot substituted and augmented with synthetic examples, ran controlled validation against held-out real data, and cut time to deploy by about 40%. Importantly, labeling costs fell, and operational false positives decreased slightly once they tuned the production thresholds. That's a clear business delta. Faster deployment, lower labeling spend, and measurable performance uplift.
Okay, the decision rubric. Leaders need plain rules. First rule, substitute for privacy-sensitive data only when real data access is impossible or unacceptable, and you have strong fidelity checks. Second rule, augment for rare events when you can validate downstream model performance against a realistic holdout. Third rule, avoid synthetic when the business needs causal inference about real-world behavior or when fidelity checks fail repeatedly. Quick signal to pick a pilot? Choose a narrowly scoped use case, measurable parity goals, and a path to third-party validation.
Let me translate that into 3 practical questions you can ask in a leadership meeting. 1. Can we access sufficient, compliant, real data in a useful time frame? 2. Do we have held-out real examples to validate model behavior? 3. Is the use case narrow enough to define parity metrics and stop gates? If you can answer these, you know whether to substitute, augment, or say no and revisit scope.
Measuring trade-offs and ROI. Boards love simple metrics. Frame the ask with time to data, how many days saved to get usable training data. Labeling cost delta, cost with synthetic versus real labeling, and model performance versus baseline, AUC lift, precision at threshold, business KPIs. Put numbers on the table. We estimate a 60-day acceleration, X reduction in labeling, and a Y% uplift in detection rates. That makes the funding conversation concrete.
Now, governance and compliance essentials. Don't treat synthetic as a secret sauce. Treat it like production data. Required artifacts. Generation provenance, who generated it. Version config, seed descriptions. Fidelity checks, statistical comparisons and edge case coverage. Linkage risk assessment. Can synthetic be relinked to real individuals? And independent or third-party validation results. Contractually, require vendor obligations for explainability, audit access, and remediation commitments if outputs create regulatory exposure.
Operational rollout pattern I recommend: pilot, validate, integrate. Keep pilots small and high impact. Assign a single owner with accountability for metrics. Embed privacy and legal approvals at pilot start, and codify minimal tooling. Reproducible generation pipelines, simple fidelity dashboards, and unit casts for generation logic. Important: push monitoring into production. Track data shift signals and model performance drift tied back to synthetic provenance. Define escalation gates that pause or revert when thresholds breach.
We recorded a short insight from a chief data officer who ran a synthetic pilot. I'll read a distilled excerpt in their voice, anonymized. They said, "Our first mistake was starting broad. We tried to syntheticify everything and ended up with edge case gaps that only appeared in production. Second, we didn't bake in independent validation early enough. The fix was narrowing scope, agreeing numeric parity goals, and forcing a third-party check before scaling. That buy-in from procurement and legal made all the difference." Let's close with a prioritized 30-90-day checklist and decision gates you can run in a leadership cadence. Days 0 to 30. Identify a single use case, assign the owner, secure privacy and legal sign-off, and define parity metrics and stop gates. Days 30 to 60. Run a bounded synthetic pilot with versioned generation, perform fidelity checks, and get independent validation. Days 60 to 90. Measure model performance versus baseline, present labeled ROI metrics to the steering committee, and negotiate procurement terms that include audit rights and remediation clauses. If parity goals fail at any gate, pause, diagnose, and either rescope or revert to real data approaches. A few bits of procurement language to take to legal. Require generation provenance logs retained for a minimum period. Demand vendor cooperation for independent audits. Include a clause for explainability artifacts tied to training data. Set SLA-style commitments for remediation if synthetic-induced performance failures occur. And define acceptance tests, numeric parity thresholds the vendor must meet before production rollout.
Key takeaways. 3 executive actions. 1. Pick one narrowly scoped, high-impact pilot and define parity metrics now. 2. Embed legal and independent validation into procurement and require simple, auditable artifacts. 3. Measure and present board-friendly ROI, time to data, labeling cost delta, and model performance versus baseline. From models to measurable value, that's the goal.
If you want the deliverable I mentioned, the 5-item executive playbook, and a set of template vendor clauses, we've made that available for download on the show website. Go grab it, bring it to legal and procurement, and you'll have a concrete starting point. If you found this useful, subscribe to datascience.show, share with a CDO or CPO who's wrestling with data scarcity, and connect with us on LinkedIn to continue the conversation. Thanks for listening. That's the difference between models and value.
Thanks for listening to datascience.show. If you found value in this episode, subscribe, share it with your network, and join us next time as we explore how data science drives smarter decisions and better business outcomes.